Welcome back to Season 3 of DrWhitty Today. In this episode, Dr. Whitty sits down with Alexander Stewart, a New York native, author, speaker, life coach, mental health advocate, active duty service member, and the powerhouse behind Unspoken Words, LLC. With 13 years of military service and a mission rooted in impact, Alexander is fighting for lives on and off the battlefield, serving on boards of two major nonprofits dedicated to preventing suicide in the military and veteran communities. His purpose is simple: change lives with his voice, his story, and his unwavering advocacy. And now, help me welcome today's hosts, Alexander Stewart and Dr. Whitty. All right, welcome to Dr. Whitty Today. So glad everybody is here to join us. Before we get started, I'm going to apologize for the tardiness, but you know how things don't always work out as you plan, but nevertheless, they're still going to go on. So thank you for tuning in. We have an exciting show for you today. We have Mr. Alexander R. Stewart. He's an author and entrepreneur. And so he's on the platform, and I'm going to give him just a minute to introduce himself to you. Go ahead, Mr. Stewart. How are you?
Hey, Dr. Whitney. I'm doing pretty well. Hello to everybody. My name is Sergeant First Class Alexander R. Stewart, active duty service member, 13 years in. Also an author of the book Unspoken Words, The Thoughts of a Soldier, and then the head of Unspoken Words, LLC. And then I am also a board member on the nonprofit's SAR flag, and I'm a board member for the DAGME Action Group against mental health.
Thank you, Mr. Stewart. Glad to have you. I know it's been a long time. We planned this last season, and we're gonna get into some awesome information about mental health and talk a little bit about your story. And I'm really sure and glad that you're willing to come on the platform and share your story, because I believe that it's going to help tremendously for those that are tuned in, and will share it with somebody else. So before we get started, I just want to do a quick rundown. All right. So before a man becomes anything, he, like a leader, a creator, a protector, a healer, he must first confront the version of himself that he's been avoiding. Discipline isn't about punishment. It's about alignment. It's the daily decision to rise, to refine, to rebuild, and to become. So today we sit with a soldier who learned discipline in the silence between heartbeats and the spaces where words were never spoken. Today's episode is not a conversation about who you are. It's a conversation about who you're becoming. So ladies and gentlemen, one more time, welcome to the platform, Alexander Stewart. All right, so we are going to get into some questions with Alexander. Then we also have an opportunity for viewers to come up on the platform to ask a question, or make a comment about something that you gleaned from tonight's show. We'll do that a little bit later. And then we'll also have a rapid fire round, which is always some fun. So let's get started. All right. The discipline to become. What does that really mean to you?
So I would probably say that all of us, we have a goal in life, or of who we want to be, where we want to get in life. And everybody has those aspirations, and that's those goals. At some time we can be motivated to do those things. However, there's a difference between having the motivation to accomplish something and actually having the discipline to carry it out. You need to be able to reshape yourself, reshape the image you have of yourself, your mentality, you restructure everything about yourself in order to get to, that goal, that end state of becoming who you want to become. I always tell people that there's a big difference between motivation and discipline. And people don't tend to understand that motivation really only works for the time where the goal outweighs the work. And at some point during your struggles, you're going to get to that plateau where, that finish line doesn't look as nice as it did in the beginning. And then that's where people need to understand discipline kicks in. And they also need to understand that if you do want to, you know, become something new, you're going to have to reshape yourself, not just physically, but mentally, psychologically. At the end state, you won't be the same person that you were when you began that journey. And I think that a lot of people misunderstand that or just lose that concept. And, military is a really big way to demonstrate how you have to really break down something to the bare, bones, where they take a civilian and they break you down to the basics, and then they restructure you and build you into, the service member that you need to be. And I think having that perspective from being not only a service member, but being a drill sergeant and having that job of doing that has really helped me kind of reshape my stuff and help me develop that discipline, develop that structure, understand how to approach everything in order to get to that end state goal.
All right, thank you. I remember that all too well. First, commend you for your 13 years of service. I'm also an Army veteran. I did 23 years, so I know it all too well. The breakdown, getting to the point where there's nowhere left to go besides up. Right? You come in and you're thinking to yourself, "Oh my God, what did I do here?" At least that's what my thought was. But then, like you said, through the discipline, through the camaraderie, just through the patience, the perseverance, you were made into something that you never even imagined that you could be or do. So thank you for that. All right. Next up is discuss the emotional, mental, and spiritual battles captured in your book, Unspoken Words, and how others can learn from them.
All right.
To talk about everything, just, you know.
Absolutely. So the whole concept of Unspoken Words was to be able to figure out a way to convey properly the internal emotion, struggles, and thoughts that service members that have experienced certain traumas that, someone who lives a life outside of the military might not ever really understand. And to take those thoughts, struggles, and inner dialogues and put them on paper in order to present them outward to others that want to understand and maybe help, or do an outreach to someone that they see might be struggling. It was built in order to be a tool. 9 times out of 10, when you try to talk to anybody who's been through something, with whether it be military, first responder, or just in general, they have a severe traumatic event, or have habitual severe trauma in their life. It's really hard to get them to open up and really get into the weeds on those topics and discuss with you exactly how these things made them feel, or how every single day could be a struggle for them, how they keep reapproaching the same issues and reliving through these same traumas. And Unspoken Words was supposed to be that bridge that would close that gap between somebody that is trying to find someone to speak to, but doesn't really have the words to convey, or also has a doubt that they might not understand. And then on the other end, that person who has no experience with that, but cares and wants to, be able to empathize and be there for the person and understand their struggles, understand what it is they're going through on a daily basis. And that was the key note for Unspoken Words, and the key concept was to be that tool, that bridge, so that way, that gap could be closed and hopefully, be utilized to help gain an understanding for those who haven't experienced it, and then also help those people who feel like they're struggling on their own have somebody that can finally connect with them. Maybe not on an equal level, but now on a level of some understanding.
Okay, great. Now, I know a part of your story, and hopefully you'll share it, but the experience that you had with trying to advocate for yourself and, just feeling like nobody was willing to listen, or just people trying to push you aside or make light of your situation. And just share a little bit about that and what you had to do to overcome it.
Absolutely. So it was around 2017, 2018 timeframe where I had now served in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria all within about a 5 year span. And all of these were combat tours. All of these were different countries, different enemies, different all around. And at the end of those three tours, I tried to finally, seek help, because what I realized was I had spent almost 5 years on and off fighting, and I kind of lost myself and forgot how to, relax, loosen up, not be as um, intense. So when I went to go seek help at that time, which I was stationed at Fort Hood, Texas, I went in and I spoke to the front desk and I said, "Hey, I think I have post traumatic stress disorder. And I have a lot of issues going on. I would really like to talk to somebody." And at that time, it was a very high deployment rate for that base, and they had a very high threshold of personnel going to behavioral health. The front desk told me, "Well, are you thinking of hurting yourself or anyone around you at this time?" And I said, "No, but I know something is wrong, and I would really like to talk to somebody." So what the front desk told me was at that time they could only take high risk soldiers, and if I was not a high risk soldier, I was not able to be seen by the behavioral health clinic that was designated for my brigade at my duty station. So what she did is she gave me some cards to go talk to some other people, and then told me that if I ever got to the point where I was going to hurt someone or going to hurt myself, then I could come back and I would be seen there. And that kind of was a big pushback and a shutdown, to be somebody. And at that time, I was already, I was either a very senior sergeant or a young staff sergeant. And, to finally be at that point where I wanted to talk to someone in a world where you're constantly told, "Hey, don't talk to anybody. If you speak, it'll mess up your career. And, you can lose this, you can lose that. You might even get kicked out." And at that point, I was already past all that. I didn't care anymore. And so after that moment, I shut down and I stopped seeking help and I stopped talking to people. And when I did reach out to friends or family members, I would get a lot of, "Well, hey, man, that's what you signed up for. You know what you were getting yourself into, that's the military life. That's what, combat soldiers go through." And that went on from that 2017, 2018 timeframe all the way until 2022, where I had an activating event, which I've openly spoken about, where my dog bit my spouse, and I reacted a way that a combat service member reacts to seeing blood, screaming, crying, and especially from your significant other. So my dog, which we had for years, went from gnawing at her arm and snarling at me to screaming and getting basically punted across my entire house, and that scared me really bad. I never had a situation where I completely had lost control and I just reacted. I blacked out. I immediately it all happened within like a 3-second period. And my spouse went from, screaming and crying about the blood dripping from her hands from being bitten to screaming and crying, "Hey, what did you do? What did you do to him?" And, I looked and I saw my dog like frozen. He went into shock. So he locked out his legs. He wasn't doing anything. His face was all weird. And I thought I killed my dog. But at that time, I didn't know. I didn't even know what happened. My wife basically had to fill me in. And luckily, nothing was wrong with the dog. He bit his tongue from getting tossed, but that was it. But it wasn't like a, hey, I'm beating on him. It was just like a reaction. I picked him up and I got the biggest distance between him and my wife that I could. And by doing that was just me. It wasn't a punt, it was a hand toss across the house. But at that moment, for the first time in my life, I was scared. I was scared that I had lost control. I was scared to be around my family. And I was stationed at Fort Benning now as a drill sergeant. And I had went immediately to the facility at Fort Benning and tried to admit myself. I walked in and I told them, hello. I just had a really big activating event in my home. I know I suffer from post traumatic stress disorder. I need to be seen right now. And the front desk tried to do the same thing. They're like, are you going to hurt yourself or anyone else? I said, no, but I am not going home. I don't feel safe. I'm not putting my family at any kind of risk. I'm going to speak with somebody today. And then they tried to hit me again with the, well, if you're not going to hurt, we can set you up. And the appointments were like 6 weeks out. So I looked at her, I go, oh, let me rephrase that. Either I talk to somebody or you are going to need help. And then all of a sudden, everybody's really nice. And I got in the back immediately. And I did my intake. But then here we go again. I did an intake. Turns out it was a civilian, not a doctor, who did my intake, heard everything I had to say, heard that I was edgy, heard that I was constantly looking over my shoulders. And on paperwork, they put down, hey, he sees things and hears voices, which was not true, which was not accurate. Like I said, not a doctor, it was just somebody doing an intake and just writing down what I said. And it took me 2 weeks after that to finally talk to somebody. And when I talked to somebody, it was a doctor who let me know, hey, this is what was put on the intake, and we're going to initiate a medical evaluation board for you. And we're going to push you out of the military because they marked you down for having psychosis, which is not correct. And I argued that immediately. And I had to do my intake again with them now with a doctor, right? Repeating the whole intake. And then that doctor informed me, hey, I'm leaving in 2 weeks. So you're going to do this intake with me, and then we're going to get you a new doctor, and you're going to have to do it again. Long story short, it took me 6 months after that event for me to finally see somebody and finally sit down and have a doctor who helped me fight the fact that they put psychosis down. They removed it from the system because they talked to me about what was actually going on. And she switched it. It was hyper alertness. Not, I wasn't hearing anything. I wasn't seeing anything. Just something moving or shifting in my house would make me very, very edgy. And that was kind of that process. And that whole time, I had people telling me, well, hey, you're not at that point now where you're going to hurt yourself. So come back when you are. Or, hey, you have issues and we're just, instead of taking care of you, we're just going to get you out of the military. You no longer are fit for duty. And I had to prove that I was fit for duty, which I did. But it's just another, almost a slap when you're talking about trying to seek help and getting help from people. And that was really what kind of pushed me to start doing advocacy and help others through that process, help others seek help without the fear of, being pushed out or losing your career or anything like that. Or, without having to deal with what I dealt with, because no one should be at that point where they're finally seeking help and then be told, hey, we can see you in about 6 weeks, or we can told, unless you're, going to hurt yourself or someone around you, come back later.
Thank you for sharing that. I'm really glad that you advocated for yourself and you didn't just, accept the first thing that was given to you, because that happens so many times to people, not only in the military, but even civilians. I, for one, have seen it during my time in the military. And you're right, there's a stigma that, if I go, I'm going to be labeled, I'm going to lose my career. Nobody's going to want to work with me. I'm not going to be able to lead. And as you said, nobody should have to walk around thinking that they should be able to feel confident that when they show up at the facility, that they're going to advocate for themselves and that those people that are in those positions are going to take them seriously and then, give them the treatment that they not only deserve, but should have. So I'm really glad that had the discipline, the resilience, the wherewithal, whatever you want to say, to stand firm in your position and let them know, hey, I need treatment. I'm letting you know up front what is going on, and I'm not going to let this go until um, the outcome that I'm looking for is happening. So thank you for doing that, and I hope people that are listening to your story, if they are in a position like that, that will give them some confidence to make sure that they advocate for themselves. Or, if they feel like they're in a position where they don't know how to advocate for themselves, that they can reach out to other resources to be able to help them advocate for themselves. So thank you for sharing that. All right.
Absolutely.
So, oh, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say absolutely. And I also don't want to sugarcoat it for anybody listening and say that, like, hey, I just had that fortitude. Like I said, I shut down. And during that time, I'm open about it. There was about 7 instances where I almost took my own life because felt like nobody cared, or, hey, they're going to take my career, or, hey, my family would be better off without my stuff, or I can't deal with this stuff anymore. And there's no one that's listening, no one wants to hear what I have to say. So, you know, it got to that point where I was, at that edge about 7 different times, different scenarios. I won't get too deep in the weeds, but alcohol was not the answer. But of course, I was military, so it's the cheapest answer. And there were many times where I was, sitting on the floor with either a K bar or some kind of weapon, and just staring at it with a bottle of something, and contemplating, would this be easier? So I don't want people to either, to look at this and go, oh, well, he went in, he had the fortitude. No, I had my absolute downs too. And it was the fact that I had sat there for so long, and I had, allowed other people to push me away and push me back into, struggling, and that I had been at that low point. And it helped me, like we were saying, like the discipline to become, I'm a parent, and I decided that I wasn't going to let anybody do that to me anymore. I wasn't going to let somebody tell me, hey, it's not bad enough yet, come back when it is, because at points it was that bad. Just because it's not that bad today doesn't mean that it wasn't bad yesterday or the day before that. So I just wanted to be open about that and let people know that it was not just like a, hey, you get kicked back and you just deal with it. No, I almost lost the struggle many times, but it was that final thing where, like I said, I was terrified for myself, because I had never really lost control, around those I care about and my family. And it was that I would say probably, some mental fortitude of being a service member and a senior at that point, because I was a sergeant first class, um, and also just being a father and deciding, I'm going to fight for my kids, and I'm going to fight to make sure that I'm present for them, and I need to get better, so that way I can be a better parent, a better father, and be present and give my kids everything they deserve.
All right. Excuse me. Thank you for your clarification again. So happy that, as everybody else is saying, that it turned out this way, and not in a worse way that it could have turned out. So again, so glad that you hung in there and did what you had to do to make sure that the folks that were supposed to treat you definitely did, so that you can be where you are today, which is right here and just sharing your story and being able to help somebody else that may be going through the same thing. So thank you. So becoming requires loss. Talk to us about what you had to let go of in order to become.
Absolutely. I think the first thing, and it's one of the hardest things for any of us to do, pride. I had to completely let go of my pride, and any sense of stubbornness that I had, in order to accept and realize that I wasn't who I wanted to be. I wasn't who I could become. I had a lot more potential, but for the longest time, I was, that young, proud guy who's like, no, no, I'm top of my game. I'm the best that, there absolutely is out there. I'm the best version of myself. And it wasn't until, I took a nice hard look in the mirror and kind of told myself, you're kind of messed up and you've done things you're not proud of. You're not, the person that you wanted to be at this point in your life, and we could do better. And with that, there were other things I had to let go too, um, where I grew up and certain culture things, certain background things, I had to just let it go and realize that, like, hey, this was good for that point in time in my life, but now where I want to go, who I want to be, I need to shed that and allow for new things, new structure to take hold and help me rebuild to, further my goals and get to the end state. Because for the longest time, and a lot of us do this in life, we have that goal of who we want to become. And for about 6 years, I kind of just didn't make any efforts towards it. And eventually there was just something that clicked. And I don't remember the exact moment. I know it had something to do with me looking at like retirement and realizing like I hadn't really done anything at that point in my life. I was around like 25, 26. And I realized that I hadn't really done anything for retirement. I hadn't like set myself up. And something in that like small little thought triggered a bunch of other things where I was like, well, wait a minute. I'm not psychologically where I want to be. I'm not where, I want to be as a parent. I'm not where I want to be as a husband. And it kind of just, spiraled into this big goal of wanting to be better and wanting to finally, become that person I promised myself when I was young that I would be growing up. I wanted to be the person that people could look up to. I was always somebody that growing up that was almost like a guardian. I grew up with an autistic younger brother. I grew up coaching kids that were disabled, whether it be physical, mental. It was a special sports program. So I was always somebody that was like a big brother kind of guardian. Um, but I always told myself like, hey, when you're an adult and you have your feet on the ground, I want to be this person that people, young kids can look up to and be like, hey, I want to be like that. And at that point, I just wasn't. And that age, 25, 26, is kind of where I started also looking at my mental health and trying to get help. Sadly, because of the pushback and everything, I didn't get it until I was almost 30 years old. But that was really the big thing. And I would say pride and letting go of an ego and letting yourself accept the fact that there's always something that you can improve. You're not the best version of yourself. There's always going to be a better version of yourself, and just to accept that and then take the next step and then the step after that and just continue to build and improve, and then eventually you make it to where you want to be.
Awesome, awesome. Thank you. So pride is number one, and ego is number two. And it's interesting that those are the words that you use because, like you said, oftentimes when we're trying to become something, when we're trying to be disciplined or not, or let's say we're trying to compare ourselves, it's always pride and ego. And so we have to be very self-aware when we're operating from pride and when we're operating from ego. I remember somebody saying that ego stands for edging God out. So that was really a powerful statement to me because we have to recognize that, even though we are individuals, no matter what we're trying to become, we cannot become it without help. So there's always a blueprint, there's always an example, whether it's good or bad. But we have to have the discipline. And like you started off by saying, you can want to become it, but if you don't do anything, you'll never become it. So you have to figure out, okay, this is what I want to become. Now I got to take the steps to become it, and then be disciplined enough to follow those steps in order to get to the goal. So thank you for addressing that for us. All right. So we're going to take one more question and then we're going to go into our commercial break. So real quick, just break down some small, consistent actions that created long-term transformation for you. And we do understand the transformation is a process and you're not all there yet, but just incremental things that you had to do to reach, certain goals, certain achievements along the way.
Absolutely. And anybody who knows me in person actually will see I carry a daily planner with me, a small daily planner. And I actually do that. I do small increment breakdowns of every single task I'm going to do this day. And it's a setup that I have where on the side it has my weekly goals and then my monthly goals. And then I build my daily goals on that. And I noticed, as they say, like with the gym or anything that you're trying to do, consistency is key. So I had to establish a daily schedule, which was consistent in, meeting the daily goals that would then, help me accomplish those weekly goals that would help me push to those monthly goals, to those annual goals. And in doing that, in giving myself a steady plan and consistent plan, um, it really structured and help develop a discipline really to where now if I have something going on, even if it's a relaxing day, I feel like I'm not, doing something to be better because you can always be better. Like you said, it is a process. It's and you're never really done until the day that you leave this earth. You are never going to be done, being better. Anyone who says that they are, you know, is stuck on what we were just talking about. But I think one of the biggest ones for me was to get out of some old habits. I forced myself to develop new habits and I wrote them down and forced myself to make sure I changed my gym schedule. I changed my gym schedule to a very early morning schedule, which made me wake up early, which also made me go to bed a little earlier. And it restructured my life and allowed me to kind of shift my mentality a little bit, because now I'm awake early and then I'm aware. I feel accomplished immediately, and that's a big thing. I tell everybody who's trying to restructure themselves that they're struggling, if they feel like they've lost motivation or discipline, I tell them give yourself early morning easy victories. And that was really something that helped set the blueprints for me to tell myself, hey, I can do this. I can pull myself out of this rut. I can get away from suicidal ideation. I can get away from self doubt, self loathing, all of that stuff, and just give myself these little victories. And the simple act in my checkbook, and I've explained this to a lot of people I've talked to. Every time I look down at that book and I put one check on a small box, it's like a little dopamine rush. Um, it's you have a victory. You did something. You're being progressive. You're not being stagnant, and just being able to have that that consistency, those small little victories over and over again throughout your day, and then to get to the end of the day and go, "Hey, I accomplished everything I put down here. I didn't waste my day." That really does help you build on yourself, and also that helps you get to those goals. And it might not seem it and during those small little victories, but if you're doing it correctly and you're setting yourself up the right way, every little victory that you're going to make will contribute to those big goals at the end.
All right, thank you. Like you said, we're always we're never really reaching an end goal, not until we're out of here. So we're always becoming. Once we become one thing, it's time to become the next. There's always something for us to pursue or achieve to better ourselves, not just to have something to do, but purpose. So that's why it's really important that we never think that we ever arrive, because as soon as we think we've arrived, I heard one person say, "When you're finished, you're finished." when you get to that point where you think you've arrived, there's nowhere else to go. So what are you going to do? So it's important for us to remain humble, and whatever goal that we set for ourselves, when we reach that goal, then now it's time to ask ourselves what's next, because there's always something more for us to do, something, a way for us to become better at something. Uh, just taking us to higher heights and deeper depths. So thank you for that. We are having a great conversation tonight with Alexander Stewart. He is the author of Unspoken Words, The Thoughts of a Soldier. We're talking about the discipline to become, and we're having an awesome conversation. What we're going to do is we're going to take a quick break, go to a few commercials. We're going to come back and we're going to invite listeners and viewers out there. We're going to drop a link in the chat. If you have a question that you'd like to ask myself or Alexander Stewart, or you have a comment about what you're gleaning from tonight's show, don't be shy. Click on the link and we'll bring you up on the platform to ask your question or make your statement. All we ask is that you be prepared so that we can continue to move on and keep the time here. We want to be, we want to respect your time is what I'm trying to say. So just be ready with your question or your comment. So quickly, let's go to break and we'll be right back.
Bold, urgent, and deeply human, cultural silence in wounded souls cracks open the quiet too many black men carry. Mark Tuggle brings raw honesty and courageous storytelling from 30 voices, intergenerational, diverse, unfiltered, turning stigma into conversation and pain into possibility. Read it, listen to it, and join the movement to heal, connect, and change the narrative. Listen to the stories, break the silence, start the healing. Get your copy at Amazon.com.
Life is a beautiful, complex journey, but amidst the hustle and grind, how often do we stop and ask, are you okay? Introducing Are You Okay? A mental health and well-being check-in and conversation, the groundbreaking book by Dwayne Wiggins Jr. With a sincere heart, Dwayne takes you on a journey that reminds us all mental health matters. This powerful guide encourages open dialogue about mental well-being, showing how vulnerability fosters healing, connection, and understanding. It's a call to reflect, reach out, and break the stigma around mental health. Together, we can build a community rooted in empathy, support, and understanding. Start your journey today. Pick up Are You Okay? And spark meaningful conversations that truly matter. Because when we check in on each other, we grow stronger together.
Alrighty. Well, I hope I hope my volume is working. But um, so that's actually a really good question. Um, I think it's something that's important for everybody to realize is if you do come out on top of internal struggles, thoughts, suicidal ideations, if you can move beyond it and start bettering yourself, it's something I always highlight. It never goes away. It's not something that you can defeat and then it's gone forever. It's always going to be something that's there. The internal chaos is always going to remain. It's kind of like a shadow that follows you everywhere that you go, waiting for you to slip up and fall back into that. So I think a big way is I try to keep myself like grounded and level at all times. um, I try to be rational about every decision that I make, any thought that I have. I try to always look on a brighter or an easier side of something. I try to work my way out of any kind of detrimental thinking. Resiliency experts will talk about how there's different thinking patterns and how you can get yourself into a catastrophizing, or you can start getting into a downward spiral. I won't get too deep into all that stuff, but I try to make sure that if there is something going on, if some things start resurfacing, I try to combat that with the positive things that are going on in my life, or you know, kind of have self inner dialogue on the situation. Or I think the biggest thing is accepting that something had happened, and that is something that a lot of us have trouble doing. If you've been through something, whether it be you lose a friend in combat, people that go through assault in life in the civilian sector, or in the military sector, anything, there's a lot of struggle with trying to accept the thing that happened. And I think one of the biggest things that helped me was accepting the fact that stuff was bothering me, accepting the fact that these things did happen, accepting the fact that, I almost did want to take my life a few times, and then moving forward from that acceptance and realizing that, it wasn't weakness to accept the fact that I was at that point and these things happened and these things actually do bother me. It was more of a strength. And then, you know, piggybacking off of that and then moving forward with that ideal that just because you have these issues, just because that stuff comes back and, it's weighing heavy on your shoulders, it doesn't make you weak. You're stronger, for the fact that you have all that stuff and you are able to keep stepping forward regardless of what's weighing you down. And the big concept of not letting, your traumas become your identity and control how you live your life and control your mentality. There are things that happened. Yes, were they terrible? Did you deserve some of them? No, but they're there. They're always going to be there. You can either sit and dwell on them or accept that they happened, learn from them, realize that you are stronger because of these things, and then step forward.
Great. I like how, excuse me, I like how you said that it doesn't make you weak to acknowledge the fact that you needed help or need any type of assistance. It actually shows your strength. And that's something that is really important for everybody, no matter what community you're a part of. That's really a big point, that acknowledging where you are and what you need, there's nothing weak about it. It's actually strength, because you're recognizing, hey, this is where I am. I cannot do it by myself, and I need some assistance, and I'm willing to accept the help and the resources that are out there to get me in a better place where I'm trying to be. Excuse me. So thank you for that. All right. Next up, take a moment to address vulnerability, masculinity, and healing. And just the same thing that we're talking about. These things, especially being a soldier, because as we mentioned before, there's that stigma. You're being vulnerable. You're being open about what others consider a weakness. But just talk to us about those things.
Absolutely. So we already know there is a stigma, whether or not people want to say there is or not. The military will deny it, but I can list like right now that if you go and seek help for anything behavioral health related, you're going to lose jump pay because you can't jump anymore. You're disqualified from multiple jobs within the service, and they'll tell you you're not, but you are. Um, and so there's that already. And then on top of that, especially if we're going to talk about, generation and the way that we've been taught, this new generation of service member and, society was taught by an older generation that was taught the mentality of shit, keep it quiet, shush. There's nothing wrong with you. That's your business. We don't want anyone on the outside knowing. We're not going to make the family look bad. We're not going to, and that mentality was kind of pushed on all of us when we were younger. So you already have that, right? And then cultural too. There are certain cultures where you just don't talk about this kind of stuff. It's just not looked well upon by certain cultures. So you have that you have to get through. And then you have to break that plane of being accepting being vulnerable. And that's a really hard thing for a lot of adults to do, especially adults that have been quiet and have kept this, silent for so many years. There is a whole battle that you have to have with yourself in order to, be willing to be vulnerable. And then also in that vulnerability, people feel, exposed. And are you going to get, treated well when you make yourself that vulnerable? Are people going to be receptive to what I have to say, or are they just kind of going to, am I going to open up and become vulnerable to somebody and they're just going to kind of shoot it down and tell me like, oh, hey, you're overreacting, or hey, it's not that bad. And with that, how does that affect your mentality, and how does it affect your ability to actually heal or want to open up, or the next time something happens? So there's a huge reluctance in adults to make themselves vulnerable, because at that point in life you have people that look up to you, you have people that surround you, you have peers that you worry about, maybe you have children, maybe you have a spouse, and we tend to put ourselves on a pedestal. All of us, we all do, especially when it comes to service members, first responders, anybody that's seen by society as somebody that is a little bit higher. And once we're on that pedestal, we're afraid to hurt that image that we have made for ourselves in our head, and also that society has made for us, right? If we're talking service members or fathers, by society standards, by biblical standards, by almost every standard, a father is supposed to be, the stalwart, discipline, mentally tough, all that. But at the end of the day, if you look at society today, men suicide is almost 60% higher than suicide amongst women. And there's that reason. It's that vulnerability. People just don't want to make themselves vulnerable. People don't want to look weak. They're afraid if they open up, they're going to get shut down, because that has been something that has been drilled into our heads for years, generation after generation. And it's the same thing within the military. You have your Vietnam guys, your Korea guys, and before that you had your World War II guys, and then you have your GWAT guys now, the old GWAT warriors. Hey, you deal with that, you handle it, everybody's been through it, just kind of carry on. But if you get lucky, you'll understand, and you'll be able to open up and become vulnerable to the right person. And then you'll see in that moment that, you can receive empathy, not sympathy, because nobody likes sympathy, but empathy and understanding for what you're going through. Maybe not fully understanding the breadth of what it is that you went through, but understanding that you're struggling. They might not understand the situation, but they can see that you're hurting. And I've talked to dozens of people. I've had episodes on my forum where I've had people come out and that was that moment of clarity for them, and that moment of realization, and that moment where they could be again self-healing was when the vulnerability became, a tool, not a weapon that could be used against them. And somebody was able to, reach out to them in that moment of being vulnerable, and then finally give them some kind of empathy. And then through that empathy, they were able to kind of turn themselves around, pull themselves out of a darkness, and then move forward. But I would say until we as a society can get away from that stigma, and allow people to be vulnerable, and let people know it's okay. And then and when they do open up, we need to make sure that we are receptive, and that we don't try to combat or rationalize. And that's a big thing in society these days, especially amongst like significant others. You know, there are a lot of situations where people that are struggling will open up to their spouse, and their spouse will start taking it as almost an attack on them, and other people around them, friends, family. You try to be vulnerable to those people that you trust, and they'll take it as, what do you mean you're not happy? Or what do you mean you're struggling? What do you mean you're going through this stuff? You're not happy with me? And that's nothing to do with that other person. But that, sometimes people fail to see past that. And then we do what all humans do, we start trying to place blame. And then it becomes a combative situation. And then after that, that person that opened up will never open up again. And so you have societal issues, you have cultural issues, you have, just issues amongst a marriage or a relationship or family. There's a lot.
Thank you for those comments. I think my plea to anybody that works in the mental mental health field, any type of service and field, really, when you have to deal with any type of treatment, I always say that it's important for those people not to reach compassion fatigue, because the people that are seeking your service, they don't deserve to be judged. They don't deserve to feel as if they're being blamed or they're inconveniencing anyone. They simply want to show up, to get better, and to be the best version of themselves that is possible. So I'm glad that we do have those health professionals out there that love what they do, that it's not just a job for them, it's a career, it's a calling, and they're there to support all those that are in need of their services. So like you said, it's good that we have to get away from that suck it up and drive on syndrome, because that's really where it comes from. I remember just, it was, if you just needed to go to sick call for something, it was suck it up and drive on. If you went to sick call, it was like, it was a label, and so it made other people, do things like suck it up and drive on when they really needed to go be treated for whether it was something physical or mental or spiritually or whatever. So we really got to get away from that. And like you said, it's really good for the person to just be self-aware about what's going on with them, be vulnerable, and most of all, try to make sure that you have a support system. So when you do need to be vulnerable and you do need to talk, you have it in place. Because like you said, it's nothing like finally getting up enough courage to explain what you're feeling or what you're going through, only to feel like the people on the other end, are not really receptive to it, or they're taking the situation in a way that you don't intend. So it's really good to make sure you have the right people that you talk to about these types of things. So thank you for your comment. All right. So, and how does discipline create calm, clarity, and command during high pressure events?
Well, simple. There's a whole concept behind that, but very, very, very simple, easy way to say it. So if you can remain disciplined, you can have that command under that pressure. And um, having the discipline to be able to kind of hush your mind in those situations allows you to see things the way that you wouldn't be able to see them if you were getting flustered over something, or if you were allowing certain things to grasp your attention. So being able to stay level and grounded and fully assess everything around you and encompass everything as a whole really allows you to, one, stay focused, two, figure out what it is you need to do and how to move forward, and then three, keep you from getting too anxious or letting things get the best of you. Discipline is almost key in like anything you want to do, and I mean the military is huge on teaching you that, and I think that's a steeple for any service member, especially combat ones. you know it's proven over time and time again. The world could be ending around a good service member, and they can still, function, get the mission done, and that's what we're trained to do. And you can take that same approach to anything in life on the outside, any task you want to complete, or any hardships that happen in your personal life.
All right, thank you. So let's talk about becoming after the battlefield. Who are you when the uniform comes off?
That's a super important question. And for a lot of service members, there is no answer because a lot of people struggle with that concept. A lot of people can't take the uniform off. I have a poem in my book called Broken Switch. And the whole concept is that somebody deployed, they came back, and now they have to switch back to being, a spouse, a father, or what have you, more family life, and they can't do it. It's stuck. And I think a lot of young service members, some of the old ones, have an issue with, taking off the uniform and separating their military life from their civilian life, and they really need to. For me personally, I have a rule. I learned it from somebody that I served with a long time ago. But I get home, I leave my hat on while I drive. When I pull into my driveway, I take my hat off and I rest it in my car, and it stays there. And everything that has to do with the military, everything that has to do with what happened to me during that day, that stays with that hat. And it doesn't come back until I put that hat back on. And if I ever stray from that, you know, you're bringing unwanted stress, you're bringing unneeded things into your personal life, and you need to have a personal life outside of any work life in order to, have a healthy mentality and be able to be your best when you put the uniform back on, and then also be your best when you take the uniform off. Because, work approach to life at home is never the right answer. There's always, there's different ways to handle things, but I think it's dangerous, and I think a lot of people make that mistake where they can't, see themselves on or off. And I tell people all the time, especially the young kids when I was training them as a drill. So yes, I'm a soldier and I'm a leader, and I'm a warrior, I'm a fighter, whatever, but also I'm a father, I'm a brother, I'm an uncle, I'm a husband, I'm all these other things. And if you lose sight of the fact that there is so much more to you than whatever it is you do for a living, whatever your job is, if you lose sight of the fact that there is that much more to you, you will lose yourself. And then eventually, when you leave that work, right? So when I take this uniform off permanently, that's how you fall into that rut that a lot of veterans fall into, where they feel like there's no purpose after service. And that's where they start, falling into these pits of despair. It's because they never took the time to learn that simple fact that there's your life in uniform, but there's also a life outside of uniform. And you need to make sure that you're managing that, keeping that alive, and that you have an internal understanding. And if you can do that, one, you'll have a healthier personal life. And two, you won't get hit with that crazy like loss of identity when you leave whatever it is you were doing, whatever job it was for, 20 years, because that whole time you kept in the back of your mind that there is so much more to me than this one thing. And like I said, I think that's a big issue a lot of people have these days. They get so caught up in their work, they get so caught up in the things that they're doing, that they allow that one thing to become almost all of who they are. And without that thing, then they lose all sense of purpose.
Exactly. Definitely have to know who you are, and not allow what you do to become who you are. There's two separate things. And uh, most of the time, when you ask people who they are, they tell you what they do. But we have to remember what we do is one thing, but who we are is totally different. So, like he said, take some time out to learn who you are first, and that way, um, if you have to change careers, or maybe you did your time at an organization or did your time in the military and you move on, then you know who you are and you're not feeling like there's no purpose for you left. You still know that there's much more for you to do because of who you are and who you're becoming. So thank you for your comment. Um, Tell us who and what you have become and what you are still becoming.
So I love that question and that concept. And what I am now and who I have become is nothing that me 10 years ago would have thought. Um, Over the years, I've learned to become a better father and a husband, but also beat through my struggles and seeking help. I actually became a mental health advocate. I became an author. I became a leader outside of the military in a different community where I could actually, affect more people, help more people. And that was something, like I said, when I was young, I was always a guardian kind of type personality. So this to me is, you know, exactly what the young, child version of me wanted to see. I wanted to see myself become that person that sees other people in the shadows and helps pull them out. And it's funny because I didn't mean to end up where I am, but like I said, those little goals push you in directions. So one of my goals was to take my poetry, make a book, help some people, and then from there, I went from just a service member who was struggling with mental health to service member, author, mental health advocate, board member on nonprofits preventing suicide, public speaker, life coach, and it just keeps going. And as for who I'm still becoming, you know, I wish I could give you a definite answer. I think the best thing I could say is just a better version of myself, and hopefully somebody that can continue to become stronger, so that way I can help other people and continue outreach and pull other people out of the shadows, get them out of the spots that I was in, and I would just love to keep doing that. I'm a big person on legacy. I've always said, the big way that you can measure, whether your life actually, had some sort of meaning like you wanted it to, is how many people have you been able to affect? How many good things were you able to influence? How many outcomes were you able to change during your time here? Right. I always say that you don't measure somebody's, worth throughout their life based on, how much they gained or what they have when they passed, because that stuff fades. You measure it based on how many people, did they leave this life wishing they had more time? How many people, you know, saw this person and after they were gone said, there's there was a moment in my life, if it wasn't for this person, I don't know where I'd be, kind of thing. And I really want to see myself continue to go in that direction. I want to be somebody that, one, my children can be proud of, but two, that leaves this world where people saying, at one point in my life, I was at a low that I never thought I can get out of. And this person here, whether it was through my book, whether it was through advocacy, whether it was through actual reaching out face to face, this person here helped me and then taught me how to, become a better version of myself. And now I'm helping others. And that's who I want to be. I want to be somebody that can leave, uh, an environment of love, a community of understanding, and then create a generation where people, instead of belittling each other and arguing with each other based on, what they're going through or their background, or trying to downplay things. I want to just create a community of understanding and people that are actually genuinely there for each other, not there for benefits, no pro quo kind of concept. If I can do that, I'd say I'd be pretty proud. The young version of myself would be pretty proud of who I've become. And the way I'm going now, I hope I'm heading in that direction. Is there going to be stuff that changes? Is there going to be, life situations that alter, the course a little bit? Absolutely. And I'm looking forward to every single one of them as an opportunity to, overcome adversity, as an opportunity to grow, and then as an opportunity to further expand the tools that I have, which I can help others.
Good stuff. Good stuff. You're right. Legacy is not what we, it's not physical things that we leave behind. As Angela, what's it? Not Angela. I'm not getting her name correct right now.
Maya
But she
Angelou?
said Maya Angelou. That's her name,
Yep.
right? She said legacy is not what we leave behind, but it's every life that we touch. So that's an
Absolutely.
important thing, just like you said, that you want your legacy to be every life that you've affected through your personal story, through your example of the things that you've gone through, that you've overcome through your service in the community as a leader. I like how you said you became a leader even outside of the military, a part of other organizations. So those are lives that you touch in very different capacities. So thank you for all the work that you do. And I believe that you are headed in the direction that you want to go in. Maybe not knowing everywhere you're going to go, every life you're going to affect, but you do know that you are affecting and still will affect other lives as you continue your service. So thank you. We have the rapid fire round. And basically all I'm going to do is name off a few things, and you will reply by saying disciplined or distracted.
Okay.
All right. All right. It's real quick. So, morning routine,
Discipline.
handling criticism,
Discipline.
emotional reactions,
Ooh, that would be a distraction.
unhealthy social media habits,
Distraction.
finishing what you started,
Discipline.
protecting your peace,
Discipline.
saying no when necessary,
Discipline.
managing your inner thoughts,
Disciplined.
showing up when no one is watching,
Disciplined.
becoming the man you needed when you were younger.
Disciplined.
All right. That's our rapid fire round. And since you are a person that you said that legacy means a lot to you, we have one final legacy question for you to answer. And it is, Alexander, when the people you love speak your name long after you're gone, what do you hope they say you became, and what discipline did it take to become that man?
I would honestly say I hope that they say that I became somebody that, one, they could look up to, two, they could depend on, somebody that was always there, that was always, an ear, someone to listen, someone to actually hear what they have to say, someone who didn't judge, and, somebody that was just always there for those when they needed them. And, the discipline to become that is, the first thing you have to do is teach yourself to accept what people are saying, and not judge, and realize that everybody comes from different places, everyone's got different experiences, and that's a hard thing for someone to do. Put your own thoughts, your own opinions to the side, and really hear what someone's going through without any kind of bias. And then also to have that discipline to follow through as well. When someone asks you for help, that's been a big struggle. And I make sure that I go out of my way to do that. And I think those were the two big concepts, silencing that inner dialogue and allowing yourself to truly be receptive to those around you. And then also showing up and following through with everything that you say you're going to do. I've always said, as a drill sergeant, and I say it now, is I'm a man of my word, and I hope to live and die by that. I always say that, if somebody says something came out of my mouth, then a person hearing that either knows if it's a lie or if it's truth, because they know my personality. Like, well, if he was going to say that, he'd tell me. So I'd hope that would be, the discipline and the level of where I get to. And I hope that would be the legacy that I can leave behind. One of understanding, care, love, and, leadership.
All right. Thank you. Awesome guest tonight. Take a little bit of time just to tell people where they can find you if they want to reach out to you outside of DrWhitty today.
Oh, absolutely. So I'm available on LinkedIn, Alexander R. Stewart, author, speaker. I'm available on Facebook, same thing, author Alexander R. Stewart, author, speaker. Instagram, Alexander R. Stewart, and my website, official unspokenwords.org. And yeah, if you reach out, I will respond, and we can have as many conversations as you want.
All right, and he will respond. I am a witness. Again, his book is Unspoken Words, The Thoughts of a Soldier, author Alexander S. Stewart. Good book to read. You can get it at Amazon.com. Again, thank you guys for being here to join in the conversation. You can watch DrWhitty today every other Monday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. We're on Facebook, X, Instagram, YouTube, LinkedIn, and also Twitch. So becoming isn't a destination, it's a discipline. It's the quiet work you do when no one is clapping, the choices you make when no one is watching, and the courage you show when every excuse tells you to quit. Today, Alexander reminded us that the strongest battles are fought in silence, and the greatest victories are won long before the world ever sees them. So wherever you are in your journey, whether it's rebuilding, rediscovering, or rising, please permit yourself to become not the version the world expects, but the version your purpose requires. Because becoming is not about perfection. It's about pursuit. It's about showing up one more time, choosing discipline, and believing in the man you're becoming one more time. So until next time, keep becoming with intention, with courage, and with discipline. Thank you guys for viewing the show tonight. We'll see you next time. Alexander, please stand by after we go off for the after show. Good night.
Thank you for joining us on DrWhitty today. We appreciate your time, and your viewership is the heartbeat of our show. If you enjoyed this episode, hit the like button, share your thoughts in the comments, and most importantly, subscribe. Your support keeps us going, and we can't wait to have you back. So hit the notification bell to find out each time we air live. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, stay motivated, and stay tuned.